My father raised me to believe emotions are weakness, then tried to punish me for seeking therapy, so I sent him to jail. Now, a year later, he's telling everyone I'm mentally unstable. My father raised me to believe emotions are weakness, then tried to punish me for seeking therapy, so I sent him to jail. Now, a year later, he's telling everyone I'm mentally unstable. On my 4th birthday, my dad gifted me with violence. You see, one of the kids at the birthday party was running around and ended up slamming headfirst into my skull. I started crying my eyes out. That's when my dad scooped me up and took me to the bathroom. But instead of wiping my eyes dry or just giving me a hug, he hit me hard. "You're a big boy now, and big boys don't cry," was all he said before walking out and leaving me there to lick my wounds. From there, I did my best to never be upset. I was so successful that my dad even started testing me to see if I'd crack. I come home to see my action figures being chopped into little pieces with a steak knife. Or sometimes on TV, he would play compilation videos of the most gory, gruesome videos from horror movies. But the pain from my 4th birthday memory was so sharp that I never cracked. Sometimes my big brother Sam would try to come to me when our dad wasn't home. "It's okay to show emotions," he'd say while stroking my hair. "Just don't do it in front of dad, but you can always come to me for anything." At the time, I was so wired to my dad's approval that I honestly started to believe Sam was a wuss. I never told on him, but I secretly hoped he would die for being such a weakling, that it was what he deserved. Well, Dad was driving Sam to school with me in the back seat when a car started speeding down the road. Luckily, Dad managed to stop in time. As we all caught our breaths from the near-death experience, a truck came out of nowhere and slammed right into us. That's what you get for driving in NYC on Halloween night, I guess. I managed to brace for impact in such a way that left me with just a slight concussion. But as I was rushed to the hospital, I saw Sam was left behind. That's when I knew he was dead. A numbness flooded my body. Looking back, I was undoubtedly disassociating. And a few days later, when I processed everything, I came to the conclusion that the reason I was alive and Sam was dead was simple. Because he was a wuss, and he deserved his fate. And throughout my entire unconventional period of grief, I didn't cry. Not once. This made my dad love me 100 times more. He told me I was a real man, and I would grow up to be big and strong. It was like his words were my only source of joy. So whenever I felt that familiar feeling of gray creeping into my heart, I would just sink it into the pit of my stomach. My days became filled with long naps and overeating. By the time I turned 15, I was a 400-pound overweight and Sewers-Lidle teenager. I had numbed myself so much that I couldn't even remember what empathy felt like. I'd spend all day only watching out for myself with the "if I make someone sad, that's their problem" mentality. And when I turned 16, the guidance counselor pulled me in for a mandatory meeting. I thought she was going to give out to me for being so selfish, or even tell me I needed to lose some serious weight. But instead, she stared at me with her big blue eyes. "Nate, I'm concerned about you. We all are." She then handed me a leaflet for therapy. "Take this. I think it can really help." "What the F?" I yelled at the top of my lungs. "Respectfully, I don't need a shrink," is the last thing I said before shoving the paper deep into my pocket and walking out. It was pretty much the exact same reaction my dad would have had, until later that day, because my dad was watching Shawshank Redemption, Sam's favorite movie. From downstairs, I could picture Sam's face changing through his favorite scenes, how he'd always annoy us by quoting the characters as they said their lines. For the first time in years, I actually wanted to cry, but no tears came out. So instead, I called the therapy number. She told me she had been expecting me, and we had our first session right there and then. Didn't even talk about payment, and by the end of it, I was, in fact, crying my eyes out into my pillow so my dad wouldn't hear, but still. From there, I started journaling and meditating. Feeling again was so exhausting that I was still napping for hours each day, but I also liked it. I started to understand why people didn't just unalive themselves. My heart felt so full. So I was sitting at the kitchen table with my dad when happiness was pumped through my body. "Son, what's gotten you so amped up? Is it a girl?" he asked, with a knowing grin on his face. "Actually, Dad, I started therapy," I responded, bouncing my knee up and down out of fear of what was about to come. My dad froze while his hot dog was about to enter his mouth. "You, what?" The vein in his forehead looked like it was about to pop into two. I immediately ran out of the room because my dad threw a chair at the wall. Tears were streaming down my face as I locked my bedroom door and dialed 911. I gave them my address and then sat with my back against the door, listening to my dad rage through the house. I could hear things breaking and his footsteps getting closer to my room. The floor vibrated with each heavy step. "Nate, open this door right now," he shouted, pounding on the door so hard it shook. "You think you need therapy? I'll give you something to cry about." I stayed silent, clutching my phone. The operator was still on the line, telling me to stay calm and that help was on the way. I had never been so terrified in my life. I thought about Sam and wondered if he would be proud of me for finally standing up for myself. When the police finally arrived, my dad switched personalities instantly. He became charming, confused, concerned about his troubled son. But the officers saw the destroyed living room and the fear in my eyes. They took him outside to talk while a female officer stayed with me. And for the first time in my life, I told someone everything. The next morning, I woke up in a strange bed. The sheets smelled like lavender fabric softener, not the musty odor of my own room. For a second, I was completely disoriented. Then it all came flooding back. The therapy confession, my dad's explosion, the 911 call. I rubbed my eyes and looked around at the floral wallpaper and lace curtains. I was at my Aunt Patricia's house. After the police took my statement, they called her to come get me. She was my dad's sister, but they weren't close. I'd only seen her a few times at family gatherings where she'd hover at the edges, nursing a single glass of wine and leaving early. She lived about 30 minutes away in a small ranch house with too many ceramic figurines and a cat named Mr. Whiskers who hated everyone. I heard a soft knock on the door. Aunt Patricia poked her head in, her thin face pinched with worry or maybe annoyance. Hard to tell. "Breakfast is ready if you want some," she said flatly. I followed her to the kitchen where a bowl of cereal and some toast waited. The silence was awkward as hell. She busied herself washing dishes that already looked clean while I ate. Mr. Whiskers glared at me from the top of the refrigerator. "Your father called this morning," she finally said, not turning around. "He wants to talk to you." I nearly choked on my Cheerios. "I don't want to talk to him," she sighed, her shoulders slumping. "Nate, I know things got heated, but he's still your father." I stared at her back, wondering whose side she was on. She must have felt my eyes because she turned around, drying her hands on a dish towel. "Boys need their fathers," she added quietly, "especially at your age." I didn't respond. What was I supposed to say? That my father had spent my entire life teaching me that emotions were weakness? That he'd thrown a chair at a wall because I mentioned therapy? I just shoved another spoonful of cereal in my mouth and stared at the table. The next few days at Aunt Patricia's were weird and tense. She gave me the spare bedroom and some old clothes of my cousins that were way too small, so I had to keep wearing the the same outfit I'd left home in. She worked during the day at an insurance office, so I was alone most of the time. I spent hours watching daytime TV and raiding her pantry when I got hungry. I texted Dr. Rivera to explain what happened. She helped me set up a virtual session for later that week. I was worried about the cost, but she said we'd figure something out. Just having that appointment on the horizon made me feel less alone. By the end of the first week, I was going stir-crazy. Aunt Patricia barely spoke to me, except to ask if I'd eaten or needed anything from the store. She never mentioned my dad again, but I could tell she was uncomfortable having me there. Her house was too small, too neat, too quiet for a teenager to suddenly invade. One night during the second week, I got up to get some water and heard Aunt Patricia on the phone in the living room. I froze in the hallway when I realized she was talking to my dad. "I know, Richard, I know," she was saying in a hushed voice. "He's just confused right now. He needs time." I pressed myself against the wall, straining to hear my dad's response, but couldn't make it out. Aunt Patricia continued, "Of course he's hurting. I understand that, but he's your son. He needs you." My stomach clenched. She was taking his side. After everything I'd told the police, after everything they must have told her, she was still buying his bullshit. "A dinner might be good," she said, "just to talk things through. I'll bring him over next weekend if he's willing." I crept back to my room, no longer thirsty. I lay awake for hours, staring at the ceiling, feeling betrayed. The next morning, Aunt Patricia announced that my dad wanted us to come over for dinner that Saturday. She tried to make it sound casual, like it was my choice, but her tone made it clear she expected me to agree. "He's making your favorite, spaghetti and meatballs," she added, as if that would seal the deal. I wanted to refuse, to tell her I was never going back to that house. But where else would I go? I had no money, no friends close enough to crash with, and no other family nearby. So I just nodded and mumbled, "Fine." The days leading up to Saturday were torture. I kept imagining what my dad would say, what he would do. Would he act like nothing happened? Would he be angry? Would he try to make me come home? I barely slept, and when I did, I had nightmares about being trapped in my house while it slowly filled with water. Saturday arrived too quickly. Aunt Patricia insisted I wear a button-up shirt she bought me, even though it was just dinner with my dad. I think she wanted to pretend we were a normal family having a normal meal. The drive to my house was silent, except for the soft classical music playing on her car radio. My dad opened the door before we even rang the bell. He was wearing an apron and had a big smile on his face like he was hosting a dinner party. The house was spotless, no sign of the destruction from the night I left. The broken chair was gone, replaced by one that didn't quite match the others. "There's my boy," he exclaimed, like I'd been away at summer camp instead of fleeing after he threatened me. He tried to hug me, but I stepped back. His smile faltered for just a second before returning. Come in. Dinner's almost ready." The smell of tomato sauce and garlic bread filled the house. My dad had gone all out. The dining room table was set with the good plates we only used at Christmas, and there was even a centerpiece of fresh flowers. It was all so fake it made me want to puke. "Patricia, would you mind checking on the garlic bread?" my dad asked. "I think it's about done." As soon as Aunt Patricia disappeared into the kitchen, my dad leaned in close to me. "I'm glad you're home, son. I've missed you." I nodded stiffly, not trusting myself to speak. He put his hand on my shoulder and squeezed a little too hard. "We'll talk after dinner," he said, his voice low. "I've been doing some thinking, getting some help myself." Before I could respond, Aunt Patricia returned with the garlic bread, and we all sat down to eat. My dad was charming throughout dinner, telling funny stories about customers at his hardware store and asking Aunt Patricia about her job. He barely addressed me directly, which was fine by me. I pushed the spaghetti around my plate, taking small bites when they looked at me. After dinner, my dad suggested I grab some clothes from my room while he and Aunt Patricia cleaned up. I was relieved to escape the performance downstairs. My room was exactly as I'd left it, messy, with clothes on the floor and my game controller on the unmade bed. I grabbed my backpack and started shoving clothes inside, not really paying attention to what I was taking. That's when I noticed something on my desk that shouldn't have been there, my therapy journal. I froze. I was absolutely certain I'd left it at Aunt Patricia's, hidden under the mattress in the spare room. I picked it up with shaking hands. The pages were dog-eared, with red pen marks in the margins. Next to an entry where I'd written about feeling sad about Sam, my dad had scrawled, "Weak." By another where I talked about crying after therapy, pathetic crybaby. My blood ran cold. He'd been to Aunt Patricia's when I wasn't there. He'd searched my things. He'd read my most private thoughts and then criticized them like a twisted teacher grading a paper. And now he was downstairs, pretending to be father of the year. I shoved the journal in my backpack along with whatever clothes were nearest. Then I went to the bathroom and pretended to be sick, making retching noises and running the water. I splashed some on my face for good measure before going back downstairs. "I don't feel good," I told them, which wasn't a lie. "Can we go back now?" My dad looked disappointed, but Aunt Patricia immediately stood up. "Of course, honey. Let's get you home." The word home, referring to her house, felt wrong, but I was just grateful for the escape. My dad walked us to the door, his hand on my back. "Feel better, son?" he said. "We'll try again soon." In the car, I kept my backpack clutched to my chest like a shield. As soon as we got back to Aunt Patricia's, I locked myself in the spare room and shoved a chair under the doorknob. I took the journal out and flipped through it again, feeling violated with each page. Then I ripped out all the pages with his handwriting, tore them into tiny pieces, and flushed them down the toilet. That night, I slept with a kitchen knife under my pillow. I didn't trust Aunt Patricia anymore. I didn't trust anyone. School the next week was a nightmare. Somehow, rumors about what happened with my dad had spread. Some were close to the truth, that I'd called the cops on my father. Others were wildly exaggerated, that I'd attacked him with a knife, that I was on substances, that I was in foster care now. I kept my head down and ignored everyone, but I could feel their stares and hear their whispers. In English class, Terry Matthews leaned over and asked if it was true that my dad was in jail. I told him to mind his own business. After class, the principal's secretary came to get me. Apparently, someone had reported that I threatened Terry. I denied it, but the principal, Mr. Anderson, gave me a stern warning anyway. "We've received some concerning reports about your behavior, Nate," he said, looking at me over his glasses. "I understand you're going through a difficult time at home, but that doesn't excuse threatening other students." I was so stunned I couldn't even defend myself. As I left his office, I overheard the secretary on the phone with someone who had concerns about Nathan Miller's violent tendencies. The voice on the other end sounded suspiciously like my dad's. Despite everything, I kept going to therapy. Dr. Rivera was the only person who seemed to actually listen to me. During one session, she gently suggested I might want to learn more about my mom. "You've never really talked about her," she pointed out. "Sometimes understanding our past can help us make sense of our present. My mom had died when I was a baby. Car accident, my dad always said. I had exactly one photo of her, holding me in the hospital right after I was born. My dad never talked about her, and I'd learned not to ask. Maybe you could talk to other family members," Dr. Rivera suggested. "Your aunt might have memories to share." I laughed bitterly. My aunt's not exactly Team Nate right now, but the idea stuck with me. The next day, while Aunt Patricia Patricia was at work, I searched her home office for family photos or anything that might tell me about my mom. In the back of her filing cabinet, I found an old photo album. Most of the pictures were from before I was born. My dad and Aunt Patricia as kids, family vacations, holidays. Then I found photos of my mom. She was pretty, with dark hair like mine, and a smile that looked a little sad, even when she was laughing. There were pictures of her and my dad when they were dating, at their wedding, and a few when she was pregnant with me. In the later photos, something seemed off. She looked thinner, more withdrawn. In one Christmas picture, she flinched away slightly as my dad put his arm around her. When Aunt Patricia got home, I confronted her with the album. "Tell me about my mom," I demanded. She looked startled, then resigned. She sat down heavily on the couch. "What do you want to know?" "Everything. What was she like? How did she die? Was my dad? Was he always like this?" Aunt Patricia stared at her hands for a long time. Finally, she looked up, her eyes wet. "Your mother was my best friend before she even met Richard. She was kind, funny, smart as a whip. She loved to paint, landscapes mostly. She was going to be an art teacher." I sat down across from her, hungry for more. And I begged her not to marry your father," she said, her voice cracking. There were signs even then, the way he needed to control everything, the way he'd get so angry over little things. But she loved him, or thought she did. She wouldn't listen. "What about the accident? How did she die?" Aunt Patricia looked away. "It was a car accident, like you've been told. She was alone in the car. It happened late at night on a straight, empty road. There were no other vehicles involved. She just drove off the road and hit a tree." The way she said it made my skin crawl. "Are you saying it wasn't an accident?" She stood up abruptly. "I'm not saying anything. It was a long time ago, Nate. Let's leave it there." But I couldn't leave it there. That night, I snuck into the attic while Aunt Patricia was watching TV. I'd seen her glance up at the attic door when we were talking about my mom, like there was something up there she didn't want me to find. The pull-down ladder creaked as I climbed up, and I froze, waiting to see if she'd heard. When no one came, I continued up into the dusty space. The attic was packed with boxes and old furniture. I used my phone flashlight to look at labels, searching for anything with my mom's name. In the far corner, I found a box marked Lisa, keep. Inside were paintings, my mom's work, I assumed, and some journals. At the bottom was a shoebox full of VHS tapes labeled with dates. I took the whole box down to my room and waited until Aunt Patricia went to bed. Then I dug out an old VHS player from her closet and hooked it up to the small TV in my room. The first tape was from before I was born. My mom and dad at some party. She looked happy, laughing at the camera. My dad kept his arm around her the whole time. The next few tapes showed their wedding, their first apartment, holidays with family. Then I found one labeled Lisa, 8 months pregnant. I popped it in and watched as the camera focused on my mom sitting at a kitchen table, her belly huge under a flowery maternity dress. She was talking about names for the baby, me. "I like Nathan for a boy," she was saying. "It means gift in Hebrew." From off camera, my dad's voice. "We already decided on Richard Jr." My mom's face fell slightly. "I thought we were still discussing it. There's nothing to discuss." The camera kept rolling as my dad walked into frame. My mom visibly tensed, her hand protectively covering her stomach. She glanced at the camera, then back at my dad. "Richard, can you turn that off? I'm tired." "You're always tired lately," my dad said, his voice cold. "Maybe if you weren't so lazy." The tape cut off suddenly. I rewound it and watched again, paying closer attention to my mom's face. The fear in her eyes was unmistakable. It was the same look I'd had when my dad threw that chair. I went through more tapes, finding more moments like that one. My mom looking increasingly afraid, my dad's voice getting harder, colder. Then I found one that made my blood freeze. My mom was alone, looking directly into the camera. Her eyes were red from crying. "If you're watching this, Nate, it means I found the courage to leave," she whispered. "Or it means something happened to me. Either way, I need you to know something important." She leaned closer to the camera. "Don't trust him, not even a little. He's not the man I thought I married. He's..." The door opened off camera, and my mom's face transformed instantly into a smile. "Oh, hi, honey. I was just making a little video for the baby to watch someday." My dad's voice, suspicious. "Give me the camera, Lisa." The tape ended there. I sat in the dark, shaking. My mom hadn't died in an accident. I was sure of it now. And my dad had been abusive long before I was born. The next day at school, I couldn't focus on anything. The pieces were all falling into place. My dad's obsession with controlling emotions, the way he'd tested me, how he'd turned me against my own brother. It was all part of the same pattern that had started with my mom. After school, I was walking to the bus when Mr. Devlin, my history teacher, called me over. Mr. Devlin was a gruff, no-nonsense guy who most students were afraid of. He'd never singled me out before. "Miller, got a minute?" he asked, gesturing me into his empty classroom. I followed hesitantly, wondering if this was about my failing grade on the last test. Mr. Devlin closed the door and leaned against his desk, arms crossed. "You doing okay?" he asked bluntly. "You seem different lately." I shrugged, not sure what to say. Mr. Devlin sighed and ran a hand through his thinning hair. "Look, I'm not good at this heart-to-heart stuff, but I've noticed some changes in your behavior, and I'm concerned." "I'm fine," I mumbled, staring at the floor. Mr. Devlin was quiet for a moment. Then he reached into his desk drawer and pulled out a small notebook. He handed it to me. Inside was a note. "I grew up with a father like that too. You're not alone." I looked up, startled. Mr. Devlin's face was impassive, but his eyes were kind. "If you ever need to talk," he said simply, "or if you need help with anything at all." I nodded, unable to speak past the lump in my throat. I tucked the notebook into my pocket and left, feeling slightly less alone than before. That night, I decided to start recording my dad whenever I was forced to interact with him. I downloaded an app on my phone that would record audio even when the screen was locked. I wasn't sure what I was going to do with the recordings, but it felt good to have some kind of plan, some way to protect myself. The opportunity came sooner than I expected. The next day, my dad showed up at school during lunch period. I was sitting alone as usual when he appeared in the cafeteria doorway, scanning the room until he spotted me. He waved and started walking over. I quickly activated the recording app before he reached my table. "Surprise," he said, sitting down across from me. "I thought I'd take you out for a real lunch. These school meals are garbage." Several students were watching us curiously. I shook my head. "I can't leave school grounds." "Sure you can. I'll sign you out. I'm your father." He leaned closer, lowering his voice. "Come on, Nate. Don't make a scene. You know how that always ends." The threat was clear. I gathered my things and followed him out, keeping my phone recording in my pocket. In the car, he kept up a stream of casual conversation, asking about school and commenting on the weather. But once we were at the restaurant, a diner a few miles from school, his demeanor changed. "So," he said after the waitress took our orders, "when are you coming home?" "I'm staying at Aunt Patricia's for now," I said carefully. His jaw tightened. "That's not your home. Your home is with me." "Dad, you threw a chair at the wall. You threatened me." He waved his hand dismissively. "I lost my temper. It happens. But I'd never hurt you, Nate. You know that. I thought about the journal, about the tapes of my mom, about a lifetime of emotional manipulation. I don't know know that actually. His eyes hardened. Careful, son. That therapy nonsense is filling your head with lies. You think your aunt wants you around forever? You think anyone else cares about you like I do? The waitress brought our food, and my dad immediately switched back to charming mode, thanking her with a big smile. As soon as she left, he leaned forward again. Here's what's going to happen, he said, his voice soft but firm. You're going to stop this therapy bullshit. You're going to come home this weekend, and we're going to forget this ever happened. Understand? I stared at my burger, my appetite gone. And if I don't, his smile was cold. Then I'll have to take more drastic measures. I've already talked to the school about your violent outbursts. One more incident, and you could be expelled. Wouldn't that be a shame? I felt sick. He was setting me up, creating a narrative where I was the problem, and people were believing him. The principal, the teachers, probably even Aunt Patricia. I ate a few fries to avoid responding, my mind racing. After lunch, he dropped me back at school with a warning to think carefully about what he'd said. I went straight to the bathroom and threw up everything I'd just eaten. Then I listened to the recording. It was all there. The threats, the manipulation, everything. I saved it to the cloud so he couldn't delete it if he got hold of my phone. Over the next few days, my dad's campaign intensified. He showed up at the grocery store when Aunt Patricia and I were shopping, cornering me in the cereal aisle to whisper more threats. He left messages with classmates, asking them to tell me he was worried about me. He even called Dr. Rivera's office, claiming to be concerned about the harmful therapy I was receiving. I kept recording everything, each interaction, each accidental meeting, each threat. My phone was practically glued to my hand at this point. I had hours of my dad's voice saying things that would make anyone's skin crawl, but I still wasn't sure what to do with it all. One day after school, I was walking to the bus when I spotted my dad's truck parked across the street. I quickly ducked behind a group of seniors and took a different route. I ended up near the faculty parking lot where I saw Mr. Devlin loading papers into his car. Hey, Mr. Devlin, I called out, jogging over to him. Got a minute? He looked up, surprised. Sure, Miller. What's up? I glanced around nervously. My dad's out front. I'm trying to avoid him. Mr. Devlin nodded like this was a perfectly normal request. Need a ride somewhere? I hesitated, then nodded, if it's not too much trouble. In his car, which smelled like coffee and old books, I finally worked up the courage to ask him about the note he'd given me. How did you know? About my dad, I mean. Mr. Devlin kept his eyes on the road. Teachers notice things. Plus, I recognized the signs. My old man was cut from the same cloth. What did you do? How did you get away? He sighed. I left home at 17, lived with a buddy's family until graduation. Joined the army after that. He glanced at me. But that was 30 years ago, and I didn't have anyone in my corner. You do. He dropped me at Aunt Patricia's with his phone number and a promise to help however he could. I felt a little better knowing I had at least one adult who believed me. That night, I was alone in the house again. Aunt Patricia had some church thing, and I was sprawled on the couch watching TV when I heard a key in the lock. I assumed it was her coming home early and didn't even look up until I heard heavy footsteps that definitely weren't hers. My dad stood in the doorway, a key dangling from his fingers. Surprise, he said flatly. I scrambled up, heart pounding. How did you get in? Patricia gave me a key for emergencies. He pocketed the key and stepped further into the room. We need to talk, son. I backed away, fumbling for my phone. Aunt Patricia will be home any minute. He shook his head. No, she won't. Her church group meets until 9. We have plenty of time. The way he said it made my blood run cold. I hit record on my phone and slipped it into my pocket. I've been patient, he continued, moving closer. I've given you space. I've tried to be understanding, but this has gone on long enough. I'm not coming home, I said, trying to keep my voice steady. Yes, you are. His tone left no room for argument. I'm your father. You're a minor. You do what I say. Or what? You'll throw another chair? Hit me like you hit mom? His face darkened. You ungrateful little shat after everything I've done for you. Like what? Teaching me not to cry? Making me afraid of my own feelings? Turning me against Sam before he died? I hadn't meant to bring up Sam, but once I started, I couldn't stop. All the anger and grief I'd been suppressing came pouring out. You know what? Sam was right. He was always right. It's okay to have feelings. It's okay to cry. You're the one who's messed up, not me. My dad lunged forward so fast I barely saw him move. He grabbed my shirt and slammed me against the wall. Pictures rattled and fell. I was so shocked I couldn't even fight back. You listen to me, he hissed, his face inches from mine. You're coming home tonight. You're going to tell Patricia and everyone else that you made it all up for attention, and you're going to stop this therapy nonsense immediately. I could smell beer on his breath. His eyes were wild, unfocused. This wasn't the calculated, manipulative dad I was used to. This was something worse. No, I said, surprising myself with how calm I sounded. I'm not doing any of that. Instead, he hit me, hard, right across the face. The sting was shocking, but what surprised me more was that I didn't feel afraid anymore. Just angry. Really, really angry. That's the best you've got? I asked, tasting blood where my lip had split. Go ahead, hit me again. Show me what a real man you are. He raised his hand again, but this time I was ready. I ducked under his arm and shoved him as hard as I could. He stumbled backward, caught off guard by my resistance. I'd never fought back before. What the hell do you think you're doing? He demanded, standing up for myself. Finally, he charged at me like a bull, but I sidestepped and stuck out my foot. He tripped and crashed into the coffee table, shattering the glass top. He lay there for a moment, stunned, blood trickling from a cut on his forehead. I grabbed my phone from my pocket, making sure it was still recording. Get out, now. He stood up slowly, glass crunching under his boots. You think this changes anything? You think anyone will believe you over me? I have recordings, I said. Lots of them. You threatening me, manipulating me, and now this. I held up my phone. So yeah, I think they'll believe me. Something shifted in his eyes. Fear, maybe, or the realization that he'd lost control of the situation. He took a step toward me, then stopped, and we both heard a car door slam outside. This isn't over, he growled, heading for the door. Yes, it is, I replied. Aunt Patricia walked in just as my dad was leaving. She looked from his bloody face to the destroyed living room to my split lip. What happened? She gasped. My dad started to speak, but I cut him off. He broke in. He attacked me, and I have it all on tape. For once, my dad had nothing to say. He pushed past Aunt Patricia and disappeared into the night. She stood frozen in the doorway, keys still in her hand. I'm calling the police, I said, already dialing. This time, when the officers arrived, I had more than just my word. I had the recording of the entire attack, plus all the others I'd been collecting. I had the journal with his handwriting. I had the tapes of my mom, and most importantly, I had the truth. The police took my statement and the evidence. They went looking for my dad, but couldn't find him that night. Aunt Patricia sat with me through it all, holding an ice pack to my lip and apologizing over and over for not believing me sooner. I knew, she admitted, tears streaming down her face. Deep down, I always knew what kind of man he was, but he's my brother, and I didn't want to see it. Did he call my mom? I asked bluntly. She flinched. I don't know for sure. The police ruled it an accident, but she had called me that day, saying she was finally going to leave him, that she'd found an apartment for her and the baby, you. She sounded scared but determined. determined. I nodded, pieces clicking into place, and then she conveniently crashed her car that night. There was never enough evidence to prove otherwise, Aunt Patricia said softly, but I've always wondered. The next few days were a blur of police interviews and meetings with social workers. My dad was eventually found and arrested for breaking and entering, assault, and violating the temporary restraining order that had been put in place after the first incident. He was released on bail, but ordered to stay away from both me and Aunt Patricia. Word spread quickly at school. Some kids avoided me like I had the plague. Others suddenly wanted to be my friend, hungry for gossip. I ignored most of them, focusing instead on the few people who actually mattered, like Mr. Devlin, who checked in on me every day and even came to court with me for moral support. I didn't press additional charges against my dad. I didn't need to. The restraining order became permanent, and he was required to attend anger management classes and parenting courses if he ever wanted to see me again. Not that I wanted to see him. Aunt Patricia and I reached an understanding. Her house wasn't home, but it was safe. She wasn't a mom, but she was trying. We agreed I'd stay with her until college, and she even converted the home office into a proper bedroom for me, so I didn't have to live out of my backpack anymore. Therapy continued. Dr. Rivera helped me work through not just the trauma of my dad's abuse, but also my grief over Sam and my mom. I started to understand that Sam hadn't been weak. He'd been strong enough to hold on to his humanity despite our dad, and my mom hadn't abandoned me. She'd been trying to save me. One night, I sat down at my computer and recorded a video. Not for anyone else, just for me. I read excerpts from my journal, talked about what I'd been through, and had a conversation with my younger self, the scared little boy who thought emotions were weakness. I told him it was okay to feel things, to cry, to be human. When I finished recording, I hesitated over the delete button. Then, on impulse, I uploaded it to my YouTube channel instead. I didn't use any names or specific details, just my story, my truth. I went to bed and forgot about it until the next morning when I woke up to hundreds of notifications. People had watched it, they'd shared it. The comment section was filled with messages from others who'd been through similar experiences, thanking me for putting words to what they couldn't express. "You saved my life today," one comment read. I thought I was alone. I didn't respond to any of them. I didn't need to. Just knowing that my story had reached someone, had maybe helped someone, was enough. Mr. Devlin became something of a mentor to me. He helped me apply for colleges and scholarships, wrote recommendation letters, and even taught me how to change the oil in my car. Life skills, he called them, though I suspected he just wanted to make sure I could take care of myself. As for the rest of my family, most of them faded into the background. Some took my dad's side, claiming I was exaggerating or looking for attention. Others just didn't want to get involved. I learned that family isn't always who you're related to. Sometimes it's the people who show up when you need them most. Aunt Patricia fell somewhere in between. She was trying, in her own way, to make up for years of looking the other way. We weren't close, probably never would be, but we were civil. She respected my boundaries, and I respected her effort. The summer before college, I visited Sam's grave for the first time since the funeral. I brought a small stone to place on his headstone, a tradition I'd read about somewhere. As I set it down, I finally let myself cry for him, for the big brother who'd tried to protect me, who'd known what our dad was long before I did. "You were right," I told him, "about everything. I'd like to say I forgave my dad, that I found some peace with the past, but that would be bullshit. Some things can't be forgiven, only survived. What I did find was a way forward, a life that wasn't defined by what he'd done to me. I still have the recordings, the journal, the tapes of my mom. I keep them in a fireproof box under my bed, not because I think I'll need them again, but as a reminder that the truth matters, even when it's ugly, even when no one wants to hear it. Sometimes I think about that little boy on his 4th birthday, crying in the bathroom, learning the hardest lesson of his life. I wish I could go back and tell him that his dad was wrong, that feeling things doesn't make you weak, it makes you human, that the real strength isn't in hiding your emotions, but in facing them head on. But I can't go back. I can only go forward, and that's exactly what I'm doing.